Hey guys, it's Bellamy here from Midnight Suns, and today I have 5 quick tips for you guys to climb in the Overwatch 2 ranked system. And so without further ado, let's get started with the tips. So I actually made a guide like this when Overwatch 2 first came out, but since then we've had 2 reworks to the Overwatch 2 competitive system, and so I thought it would be a great opportunity now, especially with another rework to the competitive system coming, for me to make this updated guide and these 5 tips that I'm sure will help a lot of you guys. So my first tip is for you guys to exploit your teammates' strengths. This means synergizing with your team. So for example, if you have a very good Mercy one trick on your team and you're playing DPS, maybe you can pick a hero like Sojourn, Pharah, Ashe, or even Soldier 76. You know, these heroes that work very well with a Mercy pocket. Or if you're playing support and your team insists on playing a dive comp, then you can also play a support hero that's good with a dive comp, something like Life Weaver or Ana, heroes that can do a lot of healing over long ranges accurately. And if your team insists on playing a poke comp and you are the tank, there's nothing wrong with just playing something like Reinhardt or Orisa and just pushing the payload. At the end of the day, it just depends on what your team is doing and then you can synergize with them. Now you might ask, what if your team is really bad and they're holding you down? Well, that brings me to tip number 2, and that is to exploit your enemy's weaknesses. So instead of focusing what your team is doing wrong, instead focus on what the enemy team is doing wrong. That means if you can't rely on your teammates to counter the enemies, you can counter them yourself. So whether it's like counter-picking tank, or counter-picking DPS, or even counter-picking support, there are various ways to counter your enemy's team comp just by changing your own hero, or even just changing the way you're playing your hero. For example, if they have a really good Widowmaker or Hanzo that's just sniping your team over and over, then there's nothing wrong with changing to Winston just to get them out, or if you're a DPS, then you can also just switch to Sombra just to force them to change. And if you're playing support and you're constantly getting picked off by like the enemy Genji or Sombra or like their divers, then there's nothing wrong with switching to even a hero like Moira and just being extremely survivable and even killing their Genji and their Sombras. And if you notice that the enemy has a weak link in their team, then you can also focus that weak link so that you can turn the game into a 4v5. So yeah, instead of focusing so much on what your team is doing wrong, instead direct your attention to what the enemy team is doing wrong and exploit their weaknesses. So my third tip is for you to get good at using independent heroes. So what I mean by independent heroes are heroes that you can perform well with no matter how bad your team is. So for example, on tank, Zarya is a good independent hero because a lot of her health is in shields and she can double bubble herself. So in case you didn't know, a good portion of Zarya's health is actually in shields. So if she doesn't take damage for a certain period of time, she will actually recharge her own shield health. So you can actually regain a lot of health without relying on your supports to heal you. And you can also save both bowers for yourself if you really just want to maximize your own personal survivability. Now for DPS, a good example of an independent hero would be Soldier 76 because he can do a lot of damage and he can heal himself with his healing canister. So you don't really need your teammates to play around you. And for supports, a very good example of an independent support would be Moira because she can do both damage and heal herself. And she is also one of the most survivable supports in the game, so you don't really need your teammates to peel for you and you can just go on and do your own thing without relying on your teammates to help you out. So yeah, these are just some heroes in the game that you can always do well with no matter how bad your team is. Definitely get good at them if you can. And my fourth tip is for you to make sure that you use heroes that play to your strengths. So not everybody in this game is gonna have the mechanical skill of a top 500 Widowmaker. And it's very important to notice what your own personal playstyle is. So you can look at what the meta is, like what the Overwatch League is doing, what Overwatch contenders are doing, what the World Cup is doing. But the truth is, that doesn't really apply to what is happening in the actual Overwatch 2 ranked system. In those high-level coordinated competitive environments like Overwatch League and Overwatch contenders, they have really great communication and all their teams have been playing together for many months or even years. But when you play ranked ladder, that's not gonna happen. More than half of the time, no one will even be in voice comms, so all you can rely on is pings and really just performing well on your own. There is no point complaining about your teammates playing poorly or your teammates not using the meta team comp, because the truth is, in ranked, nobody cares about what you want them to do. And the thing is, every single hero in the game can reach top 500, so instead of worrying so much about whether your teammates are playing heroes that you think are bad, instead worry about whether you are doing the best that you can. So really, if you have poor mechanical skill, there's no problem with playing heroes that require less mechanical skill. like Moira or Mei or even Brick. And if you're someone who really just loves diving in and getting in on the action, there's nothing wrong with playing Genji or Tracer or Sombra. Every single hero in this game, no matter how people say are not meta, every single hero you can find in this game, there will be some people in the top 500 leaderboards playing them. And yeah, even heroes like Moira that people generally think are bad and associate her with low level play, even in top 500 lobbies and GM lobbies, she's one of the most played supports in the entire game and she has one of the highest win rates of all the supports. So yeah, what I'm trying to say is just find a hero that suits your personal playstyle and get really good at that hero, or even a group of heroes that fit your playstyle and get good at all those heroes within that group. If someone scolds you for playing non-meta heroes, just ignore them, because if you are really good at what you are doing, you will climb eventually anyway. And finally, for the fifth and final tip that I think is possibly the most important tip on this entire list, that is to get experience with every hero in the game. So what I mean by that is, you don't actually need to be good at every hero in the game, but you must understand how every hero in the game functions. So for example, if you're playing against an enemy Doomfist, it's important for you to understand how his cooldowns work, how his skills even work, so that you can exploit his windows of vulnerability, and every hero in the game has those windows of vulnerability. Even for Widowmaker, she has that window of vulnerability in between her shots when she's charging them up. So if you see her shoot somebody or miss a shot, you actually have a small window of time for you to peek out into the open and not worry about getting headshotted and dying instantly. And yeah, every hero in the game has that window of vulnerability where you can exploit their weaknesses. So you don't really have to be good at playing those heroes, but you need to know how to play those heroes so that when you fight against those heroes, then you know how to counter them. So yeah, I highly recommend you guys to go into quick play, or you know what, even the PvE mode, you know? Just play the heroes that you've never played before and get used to all of them. And I guarantee you, the next time you fight them, you will be able to understand how their cooldowns work and really exploit their windows of vulnerability. So yeah, I cannot stress this enough. This is very important. You must be able to understand how every hero in the game plays. And yeah, those are 5 quick tips that I guarantee you will help you climb in the Overwatch 2 ranked system. I'm someone who has climbed multiple times to a top 500 using heroes that require little to no mechanical skill. And I can tell you that these 5 tips that I've shared with you are very important, and they've helped me and many others over the years climb to the very top of the Overwatch ranked system. And so I hope these 5 tips will help you guys too. And with that being said, stay gold everybody, and I don't mean your rank. I mean stay gold as in stay awesome everybody. And I will see you all again. Bye guys.